Hello, everyone. Welcome back. It's Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 68. I'm Enigmius, and today we're continuing, as always, exactly where we left off in the last episode. We created an opening in the back of the ship so that we can get into and out of the ship, and now we just placed a door so that it's not an open opening. There's a door between the inside and the outside. Always a handy thing to do. And now we're getting into kind of a finicky spot. And right now, if we're looking at the ship, where we are specifically in the ship, I'm just placing a little bit of a cargo box here so that I can store some things and keep my inventory as tidy as possible. There's a lot going on in this area of the ship because we've got a lot of faces that are coming together. We've got the back, the top, both sides, and even still some consideration for the underside of the ship that we're working on and trying to make it all come together in a way that we're happy with in terms of the looks. But we also have to keep in mind, to at least some extent, that this is also a functional part of the ship. The hull, the entire hull, is a functional part of the ship, and that it provides protection from bad things that would like to damage the things inside, including but not limited to you. So we need to keep that in mind as we go. Now, one of the things that I noticed as I was reviewing this footage, getting ready to edit it, is that there were a lot of sequences where I was just sitting there literally with my hand off the mouse, staring at the area of the ship that I was about to work on. And I edited those lengthy sequences out just because it doesn't really mean much to someone who's not actually doing the thinking at that specific moment in time. And it's not very interesting to look at after a few seconds. It's just the same thing sitting there. But I want to be very, very clear that this is a very iterative part of the process, which means we do something and then we come back and we make a few changes, and then we come back and we make a few more changes until we're eventually happy with it. And all along the way, there's the opportunity to learn a little something about how the blocks can fit together. And it's just a process. It begins with, doing it. And then over time, it kind of develops into proficiency. In some cases, I wouldn't even necessarily consider myself especially proficient because, as you'll see, there's a lot of changes that are followed by changes leading to even more changes. It's just the name of the game and kind of doing things in a way that is enjoyable. I think that's sort of the key. Is I read a lot of comments from people who are enjoying the build process, but they're not happy with the outcome, and it kind of ruins the whole thing for them. And it's just a matter of maybe not putting so much pressure on themselves to have the thing work out the way you thought it would the first time or the third time or the 12th time, however many times. Sometimes it takes a while. So you can see here, even just this little section, we place a bunch of blocks and we kind of see how it comes out, and then we remove a bunch and then we place some different ones and then we remove those and on. But eventually we'll get there. And this is probably the best example that I'll be able to come up with for at least a little while of this whole iterative process in a very small, confined area. Because, again, we've got so many different things coming together. This is just the back end. And even when we're done with this episode and what we end up with for this back end, where the rings come together around the door and all that other stuff, there's still some changes that I want to make looking at it. From the editor's point of view, saying, you know what, I bet you if I did that, I would be happier with it. It's just a thing. So you can expect to see some changes in the upcoming future on the back end. But at the same time, we've been in that area of the ship for a long time, and it would be nice if we could at least move to somewhere else for a little while. And I can tell you for sure, in the next episode, regardless of what minor changes that we will make, wee little changes, nitpicking changes, we're going to start working on the top of the ship and the sides of the ship fairly heavily. And it's going to be one of those situations where here what you're seeing is a lot of little changes taking place over a certain period of time. And when we get to the areas like the top of the ship and the sides, they're fairly large faces, and you can only fit so much detail on them before they start to look just kind of too busy. So we'll be seeing a lot of changes, a lot of area covered within a relatively short period of time. And it's just that back and forth throughout this whole process. Sometimes we spend a lot of time on a very little amount of space, and sometimes we spend a short amount of time on a large amount of space. And in both cases, we end up with something that we're happy with. So you can see now how it's coming together in a way, and I didn't intend for it to work this way, but I was glad that it worked out. You can see that the sides and the top of the ship so far, they're kind of coming out flat. You can see very clearly the top of the ship right in front of the rings is coming out flat, and we could continue that as far forward as we wanted to, really, and then detail that flattened section after the fact to arrive at the design that we want. In this case, that's not going to work because I already got an idea for what I want the back section on the top of the ship to transition to as it moves towards the front of the ship. Just leaving it flat and detailing it afterwards isn't really going to be probably the best way to go about it. But it is a way, if a person is just kind of not got a lot of experience, but is happy with some of the things they've done, just build a big flat section. Big flat section, and then as you get ideas to detail it, to make it look a little bit more interesting, you can do that. But because you're starting with something flat, if you don't like it, it's easy to revert to what it was before and still have a functional ship and not feel like you've ruined all of your hard work. Now, this area here in particular is what got me thinking about that whole notion of iteration and looking at a small part of the ship and spending a lot of time and a lot of energy placing blocks, removing them, moving things around, taking a look at it from different angles. Now, we're going to be hopping back and forth between the drone and the manual kind of view. It's going to get a little bit dark as we proceed, and there's going to be switching between lights on, lights off, removing blocks, placing blocks. It's not ideal. I think what I'm going to do before I record the next segment is I'm going to put some lamps over the top of the ship as part of the construction for the base itself, so that we'll have light shining down on the area where we're working, whether we're using the drone or whether we're using the flashlight or whatever. We'll always have a certain amount of light. So when it gets to the middle of the night, even indoors, even with the lights that we have in place, it can get pretty dark and kind of hard to see what's going on. So if you're finding that to be the case a little bit later in the video when we get to that spot, I apologize, but I am aware of it, and we're going to work to correct it as soon as we can. Now here, I'm just kind of looking at this arch that's coming up from the floor and wrapping around to some extent the tube where the fuel tanks and the generators are. The interesting thing that I found as I was doing this towards the end of the process of doing this is that this is something that you will only be able to see from the inside of the ship. Only when you're in sort of the midship or the front of the ship looking back towards the back of the ship. And even then, it's not going to be readily visible from most of the areas where you're going to be standing because there's going to be a bunch of stuff in front of it that's going to block the view. So we're putting a ton of time into this little bit of detailing and how this particular specific part of the tube is going to merge with the ceiling of the ship. And you're probably only going to see it a half dozen times in the entire lifespan of the ship. So is it the best use of time? Yes, actually, because I was enjoying it. I was enjoying the process. It may not make for the most riveting viewing, and it may not be the most interesting detail that will be on the ship. But again, we're getting down to the simplest aspects of the whole build process. It's a successful build and a worthwhile build if we enjoyed it. Unless someone's paying you to do it, and then you better produce. But in this case, nobody's paying me to do this. So I'm enjoying the process. I'm spinning blocks, messing around, seeing how things come together. I'm going to come up with something that I'm happy with, even though it's a little bit of overkill, as I say, relative to where it is and how often we'll see it. But I don't regret it. I don't regret the time spent. I am glad that I chose to edit out all of the time spent doing nothing, just staring at it, trying to figure out what I might want to do next. So the next episode, like I say, we're going to make a few more changes, a few more additions to this specific area that we're working in, but most of it is going to be a better lit focus on the roof and the sides of the ship coming together with sort of the details that we've had in mind from the beginning that we haven't had a chance to work on yet because we've been doing everything else. And we'll go from there. And it's not going to be, I think, too much longer before we actually have a completed working ship. And then we'll be able to focus on gathering the things that we need to start on a mining vessel of some sort to take advantage of the new auto miner that's not even new anymore. If you think about it, people have been using it for a long time, but we've been here building this. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.